Welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something a little different. I want you to literally look down at your hands right now. We are uncovering a hidden in plain sight mystery of everyday typing. It's something you interact with for hours every single day, probably without even giving it a second thought, but it represents a brilliant little intersection of biology, engineering, and human-machine interaction.
Seriously? Go ahead and run your index fingers over your keyboard right now. Feel around the middle row. Ever wonder why your F, J, and 5 keys have those tiny, distinct ridges? I promise you, they aren't manufacturing defects, and there is no way they're random. As you're going to see, these unassuming little bumps are basically the unsung heroes of modern productivity.
Okay, look closely at this standard keyboard layout on screen. Right in the middle is row C. You've probably heard it called the home row. This is where the F and J keys act as absolutely essential physical anchors for your index fingers. By establishing a physical starting point, your hands can intuitively map the distance to literally every other key on the board, all without your eyes ever having to leave the monitor. It's like a built-in compass for your hands.
So how does this actually work? Well, it relies on a fascinating biological shortcut called tactile priming. You see, your fingertips are packed with nerve endings that are so incredibly sensitive, they can detect textures finer than a human hair. Crazy, right? When your index fingers brush those subtle ridges, it triggers an instant neural map in your brain. You just intuitively know the exact layout of the entire keyboard purely through the sensation of touch.
But what happens if we take those bumps away? You might think, oh, I rely mostly on muscle memory, I'll be fine. Well, actually, studies show a massive 38% increase in typing errors without them. 38%! That's a huge jump in typos. It turns out our brains rely heavily on that constant subconscious tactile reassurance.
And it's not just accuracy. The impact on speed is just as severe. Get this. Even smartphone native Generation Z users immediately drop their typing speed by a whopping 22% when those bumps are gone. They awkwardly regress right back to a visual hunt and peck style of typing when forced to use a flat, featureless physical keyboard.
Section 1. The superpowers of the bump. Let's get into it. These bumps essentially gave us 5 typing superpowers. First, they serve as an instant reset button. You know, if you lose your place mid-sentence, a quick brush against the bumps reorients all 10 fingers instantly. Second, they are pure speed demon fuel, completely eliminating the need to look down. Third, they act as accuracy assassins, establishing a starting point that drastically reduces mishits. Fourth, they're ergonomic allies. They literally save our necks from the constant strain of looking back and forth from the keys to the screen. And finally, they act as absolutely vital accessibility anchors for visually impaired users.
Moving on to Section 2, the science of muscle memory.
Now, the exact same tactile logic we just saw on the home row applies perfectly to the number 5 key on your number pad. That 5 key acts as the absolute dead center of the numeric grid. So for accountants or anyone doing heavy data entry, that single little bump prevents frantic visual searches and potentially disastrous typos. It anchors the hand perfectly in the center of the numbers every single time.
Let's jump to Section 3, a brief, bumpy history.
To really appreciate how we got here, our journey actually starts way back in the 1930s with August Dvorak. He noticed typists were wasting precious time looking down at keys, so he added literal brass rivets to his keyboards. By the 1950s, IBM had stepped in and perfected the design into the super subtle 0.3 millimeter plastic ridge we all know today. But fun fact, it wasn't always uniform. In the 80s and 90s, Apple made the somewhat rogue decision to place the bumps on the D and K keys for the middle fingers instead. Yeah, it was a weird quirk, and they finally abandoned it in the late 90s. Finally, in 2002, inventor June L. Botich patented the modern tactile edges that became the universal default we use today.
Section 4, the keyboard community debate. Now, within the modern mechanical keyboard community, enthusiasts actually passionately debate between two primary styles of these homing keys. On one side, you've got the classic tactile bumps and bars. These are the raised physical ridges that give you that immediate, super distinct feedback. But on the other side are what's called deep dish keys. These feature a much more subtle, scooped curvature that hugs the fingertip for a smoother feel. Some users absolutely love the obvious ridge, while others find the smooth scoop of a deep dish key less intrusive, but honestly just as effective for finding the home row.
Section 5. Keyboards across the globe.
This whole concept brilliantly illustrates a universal human need. Whether you're typing on the N and T keys on an Arabic layout, the F and Ha keys in Japanese, or using specific foundational characters in Indian Devanagari scripts, the fundamental biological need for a physical anchor remains exactly the same. It practically ensures that a coder in Tokyo and a farmer typing in regional scripts in India share the exact same tactile grounding. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Which brings us to Section 6, Accessibility and Extreme Environments. Beyond just standard office work, these unassuming bumps prove to be literal lifesavers. They are an incredibly powerful sensory substitute. Visually impaired users use them to navigate technology in the exact same way they might use tactile paving on city streets. Furthermore, that specific feedback helps stroke survivors rebuild precise motor skills. And, get this, they are even used to guide floating astronauts. When you're floating in the zero gravity of space, your proprioception, that's your body's ability to sense its own movement and location, gets completely thrown off. So astronauts actually rely on these tiny bumps just to be able to type.
Section 7. Flat screens and future haptics.
So, what happens when we try to replace this physical ridge with completely flat glass touchscreens? Well, recent studies on haptic feedback using piezoelectric actuators show a pretty stark reality. Typists struggle immensely on flat glass without localized haptic feedback, even when researchers test vibrations that just target the typing finger versus global haptics across the whole board. Our brains simply cannot establish that home row anchor without a true physical cue.
Tech companies have definitely tried to out-engineer this problem. In fact, Apple attempted to patent virtual vibrating ridges back in 2012 to try and replace physical keys altogether. But it completely flopped. It turns out, our brains fundamentally crave the reality of actual physical texture to confidently map our surroundings. You just can't fake it.
Historian Dr. Leela Nakamura perfectly summarizes the legacy of these bumps. She states that they're not just a design choice, but a fundamental biological truth about human-machine interaction. They really do represent this silent pact between our human hands and the machines we use to build our modern world.
As we move further and further into an age of flat glass screens, voice commands, and virtual reality, we are left with a fascinating question to ponder. Can advanced haptics ever truly replace the cheap, perfect simplicity of that tiny physical bump? Next time you sit down at your desk, just take a second to feel those ridges. You are literally touching nearly a century of brilliant ergonomic history. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and we'll see you next time as we uncover more hidden designs shaping your world.